Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 44, and we have Kristin Turnipseed with us tonight. It's a great pleasure to have you on, Kristin. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So we are speaking with Kristin tonight, who is a Virtual Production Supervisor at Lux Machina Consulting. Kristin has a really interesting career coming up through all the previs, all the vises, and then moving into virtual production and having worked on some really cool movies in visualization and virtual production, things like The Batman and Mad Max Fury Road and Pinocchio, and some really cool stuff to talk about tonight. So Kristin, welcome. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I always love, just talking about my experience and, hearing everybody else's stories. And I'm glad that I get to share mine with the community. So thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah, great to have you here. So I always like to ask at the beginning how you got into all of this. Did you always wanted to get into film? Did you have like that dream as a kid? Was it something that happened along the way that made you want to get into film?
Yeah. I feel like I could probably spend an entire hour just talking on this, but the
Let's do it.
bullet points, yeah. No, I did want to work in film when I was young, but not in this way. I wanted to be an actress when I was 5. I went through a whole series of other kind of pursuits and majors and stuff. Like, I studied marine biology for a little bit, and meteorology, psychology, theater, a number of other things. But after a little while of just kind of learning little bits and pieces from a whole ton of other different things, I kind of came back to like wanting to work in movies. I've always been fascinated by them, always loved them. My siblings and I would pick apart just all those little movie mistakes, and kind of wanted to mix that a little bit with still kind of wanting to act in movies. That led me actually into animation, believe it or not. I was like, well, I'm a little nervous, a little camera shy at the time. And so I decided I'll just act behind the screen, like inside the computer. It's the puppeteering. I ended up going to the Dave School, Digital Animation and Visual Effects School in Orlando. And what was great about it was that you just kind of learn a little bit of everything. So I learned animation, and I learned compositing and rigging and modeling and a little bit of visualization, kind of just a little bit of everything. And what was great is that it's just like this soup of visual effects that allows you to then kind of experience a little bit of everything and then find, kind of what suits you. Which I did, yeah. And in that I found, kind of a little bit of a calling towards visualization. I love the cameras and like camera language and how it worked. So I started kind of pursuing a little bit more of that on my own, and then kind of got in. But it wasn't until after I had like pursued so many other career paths, and I really feel like my me being able to progress and do really well in this industry is thanks to having pursued all of those, other career paths, because I bring what I learned from psychology classes into, composition of a frame. And I bring, what I've learned in all the sciences and all of those other things into kind of looking at a space in a very technical way, and so all of this kind of education soup that I kind of went through before even finding visual effects really does feed into what I do today in more ways than I'm even aware of. So a little bit of a windy path, but it's been a really good one. I wouldn't change a thing.
That's great. Yeah, I've a slightly windy path myself in getting distracted with software engineering and various other things too. So a little bit of a process of elimination. I think a lot of people are really curious about how you get into the industry. I think people see someone who's kind of made it, as it were, in the industry and thinks that that they haven't seen the whole journey and haven't seen all of the things that you tried and things that worked and things that didn't. And it's really cool to hear you talk about that, about how you finding that your way there, trying a lot of things, some things resonated with you, and but all of them are important too, and they all contribute.
Yeah, they really are, and I guess, kind of a little bit of what you said there is that, like, not everybody gets to see the journey, right? We could sit here and have an entire conversation about, you know, Pinocchio and, the Batman, which we will do, and it's
I hope
exciting.
so.
We will, but we could have a whole conversation about that. But you're right. What people don't always see or always hear about is, like, how did that person get to where we are now? And I think it's important for people to realize that regardless of what path you take to get into visual effects, like, almost all experiences, it's very technical, but it's also a creative field, and there's room for almost all backgrounds to contribute to what we do, because almost everything about what we do in visual effects it's a group effort, and you're bringing your experiences. So you're bringing your troubleshooting and your problem solving and your creativity and your ideas, because 90% of what we do in visual effects is solve problems and, come up with creative solutions that work on the spot. And not everybody's going to think of every idea. We need that kind of collective group think. But if everybody sitting around the table has the exact same experiences, you're not going to get this, like, diversity of ideas that'll help tackle an issue at hand. And I think that, so whatever background people come from, yes, there's the technical education. You want to learn software, you want to learn the lingo, you want to, learn some of these things. But what the biggest asset is just, just bringing bringing your experience and bringing an open mind into the industry. And to that, I say that, like, there's a place for everybody in visual effects, regardless of what your background is.
It's really, really cool to hear. And I was actually having a conversation earlier with someone who making a transition from tech into the film industry, and thinking that they're starting again from scratch. And no, I did that myself, and I found that I wasn't. I was bringing all these great things that I'd learned from another industry into this one, and I think that if you go back a little way, that you can see before both you and I studied at visual effects schools, basically. But before those existed, everybody came in through some random route from some industrial pursuit that was close enough, and it kind of led to visual effects. Now there's schools, but
Yeah.
it's great to have that other experience to infuse into this industry. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's still, it's still just very important for people to realize that, like, even in what school you go to, it's really important to remember that, like, if you want to go for the really expensive, and I don't want to say that it's a not worth it. Great expensive schools are, if you get something from that, that's amazing. But if you're also the kind of learner that can go to, like, a technical school that's like 1 year fast track, you're gonna stay up super late, but you're gonna be fine. If that's the kind of learner you are, go there too. That works. I feel like it's all valid. And at one point, when I was first considering getting into the industry, I had it in my head. I was convinced that, like, only people who went to super pricey, very expensive schools that have churned out, like, these big names, if you don't go to that school, then you may as well not even try. And I had that in my head, and it wasn't until I broke out of that and was like, nah, I'm gonna try this anyway. I'm gonna go to this other place, because I didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on, a 4-year art degree, or just like crazy expensive schools. They're amazing. They have great educations, and they've made some of today's, big name filmmakers. But if that's not a path that works for you, there's other ways to get into the industry. And that's, and I think that that's important for people who are trying to break in to also remember, and for young people who are considering it, like, I think that's so important to keep in mind, that, like, there's so many different pathways into the industry that,
Right.
there's one for you.
there's no real rules in how you get into the visual effects industry, right? Like,
Not really.
people in other industries often focus on qualifications and that academic route, but here in our industry, it's all about the real in general. Like, can you prove visually that you can do something? And obviously, knowing people's useful too, but really, it's important what you can do, is what you're saying. It's not so important the qualifications.
Exactly. And if what you bring to the table is like great ideas and troubleshooting, then great. There's an excellent place for you. There's really is, you know, open, like I said, we need a diversity of thought. And so, there's if what you bring is this great ideas or different ways to approach things, then there's definitely a place for you.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up an important word there, diversity, which is something I want to ask you about in a bit too. It's something near and dear to our heart. Talking about visualization though, so what was it that spoke to you about that?
Yeah.
What was it that kind of like excited you about that initially?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, my siblings and we loved picking apart movies, and we would watch the same movie over and over again, and like got into this mode of deconstructing it from a very unscientific place. We were young. But it was, I couldn't have named it then, but kind of looking back on it now, it really was like how the frame was telling the story, how the camera movement was complementing the story being told on the screen. And looking back now at some of those films, that we used to kind of latch onto, a lot of them being, musicals. And we're big into theater as well. Uh, as an adolescent, kind of just looking back at like how the whole picture tells a story, and composition. So then in finding Previz, it was, at the time I really wanted to be an animator, and there's a piece of my heart that lives with animators. They're magicians.
Okay.
Yeah. But I also in school realized that animating like fingers just wasn't for me. I didn't have the patience. I wanted to go faster. I wanted to get through more. And the more I understood about an animator's work, again, magicians, I just realized I wouldn't have the patience to, kind of animate all of these fingers. But what I could do was help compose a frame, right? Help translate what I'm reading on a script or what I'm seeing in storyboards into a 3D space. And I could do that in a way that's quick and helps communicate what's going on and help kind of lay the base layer for then to either go off to shoot on a set or to be handed off to an animator, right? And so that's where, so it was in school where I was kind of introduced to the idea of Previz. We worked on a group project as well, and I was put in charge of the Previz for our student project. And then from there, found my way into Halon, where I had some really great, supervisors and coworkers that helped me kind of hone a little bit of like, the balance of it needs to look great, it needs to look good, and needs to communicate what the director or the DP or whoever's using the previs, it needs to be able to communicate what they want. But you also need to iterate fast, right? You're going through a couple versions in a day, or you're doing multiple shots in a day, because that's kind of the point of visualization, is to also just get these iterations done. It's a sandbox. These creative people have these ideas just so fast, and they want to be able to see if that idea is going to work. And if Previz is used, or one of the ways that Previz can be used correctly is to, is to allow those ideas to flow and allow those iterations. And a lot of them get thrown away. But a no in Previz is just as important as a yes, because if you can figure out what doesn't work before you get to set, then you've saved yourself the time and money of exploring that idea on set. And so it's just the magic of all of that, and the magic of being able to communicate with filmmakers in their language, and then helping to translate that to content that can be used all throughout production, whether it's camera language, or it's framing, or it's the feeling of a sequence, but maybe it's, a little bit of pre-editing. Maybe it's, we've got a design for a spaceship and we want to see if it works for the sequence. Like whatever the idea might be, kind of being a conduit for those ideas is really what spoke to me about Previz. And I really enjoyed, that part of it, that kind of just very, close connection to the story and the source material is, felt very special.
Right. You're in that kind of magic creative spot. The things in
Right.
post, things have been decided a long
Yeah.
while before you get the shot. So yeah, I came to Previz a little later in my career, but I totally agree. It's tremendous fun and great being able to you learn so much from being near the filmmakers.
Yeah. I've gotten to work with some really great names. I do have a story, like the specific moment
Yeah.
that like really solidified it for me. I was already working in Previz, but it was we were working on Logan, and it was great. This is James Mangold, who's always brilliant. And we're working Previz on the sequence of the refinery chase. On the limo, and we've got, everybody's back in the car. We've got all these extra bad guys, and we've mapped out, we've done all of the sequence, but suddenly we find ourselves in a position where we've got a couple extra guys on the car. We need to get rid of them because we're moving into the next phase of the sequence where they're out, by the train. We got to get rid of some of these extra guys. So all of us kind of, in the room, we put our brains together and just kind of like, all right, well, what can we do? And everyone else kind of went back and came up with an idea of like, all right, how can we get rid of one extra guy off the car? I'm very proud to say that, I've got like just cell phone footage of me doing like animation reference of myself just kind of acting something out. And the spirit of that ended up kind of in the final movie. And I saw like, it was really cool because you kind of see your fingerprint on that shot when you see it on the big screen, and you're like, all this amazing stuff is going on. Of course, the story has evolved since Previz touched it, and which is also great because it's cool to see what direction they took it in. But then you see just like a whisper of something that was like, oh, I had a hand in shaping that. And it really happened for me on that one, and it really made it like a very special moment for me. And from there, it was just like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Hooked.
I love this. I was hooked. Yeah, I was a junkie from that moment on.
The happy one.
Yeah, no, I was. Yeah, and it was great. Ever since then, I was all done from there.
That's so cool. What kinds of things do you do? Have you done in your time as a previous artist? Are you kind of a generalist? Are you doing all kinds of different things? Are you doing one particular thing?
Yeah.
What makes a good previous artist?
Oh, well, I could tell you what I've done, and then I can tell you what I think makes a good previs artist, which is, I guess, kind of similar. So what I found myself doing, and I feel like there's always a unique time in previs. Previs is very, kind of at an edge of doing like really cool creative things. And right around the time I started in previs was right like early adoption of using Unreal Engine for visualization, right? We're still animating in Maya. We're bringing it all into the engine. We're rendering out of there. It's going to be really cool. But this is also still back in like Matinee Sequencer. So for anybody who's used Matinee, it's a little bit back. It's, it really was a time where, we had people that knew how to use Unreal Engine, but more and more shows wanted to use it. So I kind of helped, kind of came in and started learning a couple things and really just learned how to use Unreal throughout the course of working on some of these projects, right? So because I was able to pick it up a little, quite quickly, it also then turned into, we would have teams of, we'd have animators and really as a previs artist, so kind of going back to the general question, a good previs artist really is a kind of a generalist in some way. In any given day on a previs show, you animate, you model, you do a little bit of rigging. You'll probably maybe do a little bit of texturing and surfacing. You're definitely going to be, bringing stuff into engine. You might be placing particles. You might be modifying stuff. I mean, it's good to have a very broad knowledge. Do you need to know? Does one person need to know how to do all of that stuff? No. But it is really good, like on a previs team, to have a couple people, one or two people, depending on the size of the project, that has this like information and knows at least how to do these things, how to edit a Niagara system, or how to kind of bring in simulation files if you needed to do a quick sim. It's always great to have animators and camera people, but then it's also great, if some of those people know how to do some rigging. If you need a very quick, suddenly we need a cup and we didn't have a cup, cool. Let's throw a bone in that. Let's animate it. Let's get it into engine. And so having the knowledge how to do some of these things is key and useful. And again, you don't have to have no one person has to know how to do all of it, but if you've got a couple pieces of that puzzle and someone else has those pieces, then you guys will fit well together and you can really just kind of bounce off each other, and support each other as a team, which is super critical for previs. Is that just really, quite a bit of generalists. And so, yeah. And then also just kind of knowing, if one option isn't working, is there a different software that might work? Just if other things, obviously, studios have their pipelines and you want to use the software that's being used in the pipeline. But if for whatever reason you're like, hey, I know this other software that's going to get this result faster or better, it's going to meet the note better, maybe that's an option. And so just knowing how to do things, but in being flexible in where you're doing that is also very, very helpful. Knowing how to animate in Maya, and then kind of knowing how to do a little bit of animation in Unreal, or or same with texturing, same with modeling, particles, all those other things. Just kind of diversifying where it's more about knowing the concepts behind animation. Animation is good animation no matter where it was made. So knowing, kind of some of the concepts behind animation and being flexible in where you're doing that is also quite helpful.
Great. Yeah, great insight there. So essentially being a generalist is somewhat necessary. You don't have to know everything, but it does help. And
for sure.
If you're building a team, because you've probably been responsible for doing that too, how do you kind of look at who's coming in and see, okay, we have less rigging, so we need to get a couple people in who balance that out and try and make sure you got all the bases covered, because not everybody knows everything.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the best things, and actually here's probably one of the most critical things is, it's not always a luxury to have time when you're on previs, right? Time is always very, very short. But that said, when I'm looking at kind of a team composition, obviously, yes, I am looking for a diversity of skills. There are a couple boxes that I need at least one person to check that box. And if they check 3 other boxes, fantastic. If they're able to come in and say, well, I'm a strong rigger, I'm an okay modeler, I'm a novice animator, that's great. Like, if you're strong in one thing, but you've got the willingness to try other things, or you've even just got moderate animation, cool. Like I can use that. I can take that and do something with it, right? Maybe I'm not going to give you an entire, character. Like maybe not going to have you animate a walk cycle, but if I need you to go in and, kind of make a head turn, cool. Like I might be able to give that to you. And then also kind of just going in and knowing, all right, if you've been honest and upfront with me and not saying, oh no, I'm a great animator, and you're not, I'm not saying, oh, don't don't undersell yourself either, right? But like, you know, if I know that an artist is wanting to learn more animation, but they just don't have enough experience, and if there's time, I'll give you some animation because there's enough to go around for sure. And the more you can learn that on this, then that just brings up your animation levels, and then you also then more useful further down the line, right? Being a generalist, yeah, it's definitely definitely key. But if you're strong in one thing and there's other things you've tinkered with, you've tried with, you want to try, I can take that and work with that. And it's almost easier to work with that than with someone that comes in and is like, well, I do these two things and these two things only, and I'm not really willing to try anything else, because there might be times where like, well, I don't have any of that work available, but I need a lot of this other work available. And if you're even just willing to like, I've never animated before, but if you tell me a couple basics, I'll give it a shot. I know what the graph editor looks like and where to find it. Cool, I can work with that. I can use it and task that appropriately. So, it really is about finding like a balance of everybody's skills on a team, but it's more like filling water cups than it is making sure that you've got X number of riggers and X number of these. It's do I have enough enough of the talent pool filling a cup, even if like I said, even if it's beginner or novice experience, those are that gets added to the pool, and it's super helpful. And then giving people the opportunity to try new things when there's the time to be able to do that is also something that I like to do, and something that I think helps a lot of other people. They just want to try stuff, and it's an opportunity. It's a good field for it.
Good place to experiment and
It
try
really is.
things out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other kind of like other skills other than kind of software tools and that kind of thing, like being in that spot, you're close to the filmmaking, so like having a knowledge of film, of storytelling, of understanding anything outside of the tools.
Yeah. So outside of technical skills, yeah, if you've got any kind of like, you know, composition or camera language, if you know camera language, that's great. If you know set lighting, if you know lighting theories, even if you don't know how to light in CG, that's all technical stuff. But like the lighting is a really great skill to have, especially with how great and how amazing these real time tools are becoming. That like previs lighting is getting to the point where it mimics set lighting, right? And so knowing how to light for a set, or having knowledge of good lighting setup, that's always very helpful. I really gotta say again, it's kind of goes back to that diversity of experience, right? So previs is very closely related to tech viz, which oftentimes it could be the same team doing previs and tech viz, but in something like tech viz, you know, working on Ford Ferrari, we had to we made all these amazing great shots again with James Mangold, all these amazing shots, and his goal was to communicate that the car is going super fast and like how it feels inside the car. But then we also had to turn around and figure out, all right, so how do we make this car look on camera like it's going 200 miles an hour, but it's only going 40 miles an hour? And then how do we help them dress the environment to look like Le Mans Paris or Le Mans France, but we're shooting in Georgia, right? And so, kind of solving these problems and kind of then doing the math, right? Getting the information in from stunts to say, this is how fast we can go around these corners, and we can't go any faster than that. Okay, cool. We've got to then kind of work out all the math of like, vehicles and just knowing like the physics of vehicles. If you're somebody that's, a racing fan, that experience would help on that kind of project. Like it's like just sometimes it's the smallest things that you wouldn't think of. It's like, well, I know this because I know so and so, and they worked in this industry, and they said this kind of thing a lot. Cool, that's a piece of information that we might have had to spend time looking for, and now you've helped us and given us that, right? Like, it's, you never really know. It really kind of does depend on the project. On Ad Astra, we spent a lot of time researching Neptune, so that we could, kind of, all right, so if we're, obviously in film, there might be creative decisions that kind of just break the laws of reality, but we do, if realism is what the client is going for, then we start from a place of realism, and then they tell us where they want to break those rules, which is perfectly normal and perfectly fine. But if we start from that place of realism, so we, all right, how big is Neptune? Let's get scale accuracy. And let's start from a place of like, all right, we're going to set our ship here and we're going to stage right here, because if we go any farther in, then we're being pulled in by the gravity and we would fall into Neptune. So let's start out here. This is where we are. What do we see? And spent a lot of time, kind of just researching these physics in space that are, things that astronauts know, but you don't learn that in VFX school, right? And so all of these, it really, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, because like really anything can contribute to being great in previs. It's kind of a very jack of all trades kind of thing. You just really, it's a grab bag of, could be anything.
Yeah, no, that's really really insightful to think that that kind of knowledge can help you. Everybody's a storyteller, right? So what's it like hanging out on Neptune then? Nice place to be?
You know what? It was a lot of fun. That was a really, really very cool project. And it was, what was really cool is during the course of that project, actually, the Cassini, I believe it was the Cassini spacecraft, was actually like diving into Saturn. Please don't quote me on this. I'm not entirely sure if I've got these facts right, but one of those spacecrafts was diving into Saturn at the time, and it kind of happened while we were like on this project in Neptune. And so it just kind of became this really cool thing. We all started watching space news really closely, and became really big fans of, all the space launches, and sort of following the rovers even more closely than some of us had been at that point. You just kind of dive into the thing it is you're researching at the moment, right? Working on Ford Ferrari, started looking more and more into, like racing and Formula One, and research the history of the Le Mans race, and like who won and when they changed the rules and all this. It just becomes very interesting. I never thought that I'd be researching, the 1969 Le Mans race, and then, learning about when they changed seatbelt rules and all of this other stuff, like, and find it interesting. If you had told me that a year beforehand, I'd been like, what? Racing? No, that's not me. But it became really cool, and it was a fun rabbit hole for a couple months of like, oh, this is a cool piece of interesting history.
Everything's interesting, really. I think if you dig into it, and it's cool. I've always said that about CG. That's one thing, learning the tools and techniques, but it's all the other places it takes you. You have to learn about the structure of hummingbirds' wings 1 minute, and then engines the next minute. Like normally you don't have to do that.
And these are the things that like they don't tell you ahead of time, that like is just so cool about the industry, because you just like no one tells you that you're just gonna sit there and research like how do monkeys react to zero gravity, right? Like if they were to be strapped out, like how would a monkey move in space? Like you don't think that you're gonna be like thinking these things when you're in VFX school, but these things come up so often, and sometimes just the most random stuff. It's amazing. I love it.
I'm right there with you. We have a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to go through a few of those. Someone's saying, given my filmmaker background, I want to focus on previs, but everyone's all about VAD. Is previs too niche, and is there a better way to position oneself? Interesting question.
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. So yeah, I hear you with that. There is a lot of bad, and especially for virtual production, I do feel like bad is very important. Um, that said, I don't feel like previs is too niche. Some places, and I do feel a little bit like the jury is still out in the industry, right? That like some places will consider previs as part of VAD. Personally, I don't. I've if VAD is the equivalent of your, your practical like art department, or not equivalent, but it is a um, sibling, sister to your art department. It's a virtual sister to your art department. Then Previs is kind of like the virtual system to cameras, right? It is because that is ultimately what you're looking for, right? The point of Previs is to be looking through your shooting lens. Doing that, or I guess, let me put it this way, without doing that, it's hard for your VAD to know what to build, right? Building a virtual world, like your virtual space is unlimited. But if you're able to go through Previs and say, all right, I'm going to put cameras here, here, and here, and so here's my line, here's where I'm shooting the sequence, then your VAD will then know, well, I've got unlimited space here, but we're only going to be shooting in this, half of the pie over here. So I'm going to build what's on the other half of that because we want it for reflections, we want it for lighting, we want it for all of these other things and shadows and all of that. But I'm really going to put some detail on the side where we're putting cameras. But you don't get those cameras, and if until you get a chance to kind of go in with your previs and maybe block in some characters. It doesn't have to be full animated walk cycles. Sometimes previs is perfectly useful and maybe better for a production if you've got people that are just standing there still, and you can just put a frame on them and say, all right, I'm going to use this camera, I'm going to use this lens, and I want this, I want, a medium close up. Cool. We can put that in the digital space and, put your lens on it. And then, all right, now what do you see? What's in your frame is where VAD needs to put their detail. They're going to build around it because, again, reflections, shadows, all of those things are very important. But if they know that they're going to be shooting right there, then it allows them to focus their detail there, which then also saves you time later if you're taking this, if you're taking all of this to an LED wall, or if you're taking this to, an AR space, or if you're doing something different with it later where you're going to need to run it in real time. Allowing your VAD to kind of focus their detail where you're going to use it will save you on frame rates later. And if you're still exploring, then that's fine. You can still continue to explore. But like if you're going to an LED wall, you're going to want to do previs so that you can kind of figure out, all right, well, how does this world translate onto a wall? If you're doing, if you're doing a number of other things, it's just very helpful. Is it necessary? I would say that is dependent on your project. I am an advocate for previs, so I can find ideas to use it that not everybody might think of, but at the same time, like I wouldn't recommend previs to a client that's like, well, we just want to do it just to do it. That's not helpful for you or for me, right? Like I don't necessarily want people to go down that direction. But if there is a problem you are looking to solve, if there is questions that you need answered before you get to set, that is where previs can help you. It can help you it can help you dial in VAD. It can help you troubleshoot issues. It can help you plan, and it can help you, kind of just understand what that digital world looks like before you actually have to go into it. The other big thing it can do is it can give you a forum for your creatives to make decisions. It gives you a set before you get to set for your DP to go in and say, well, I want to kind of maybe light like this. And a little bit of that is with the VAD. Yeah, obviously, yes. But then if you're doing that in the context of cameras and characters, then it's all that much more informational. I feel like I've gone on a lot on this, but like it's
it's important distinctions, I think, because basically
yeah,
Previz has smudged its way into virtual production, and that they're now kind of essentially one's an
yeah,
umbrella for the other, and like sometimes
it
semantically
is.
people use words for both, and sometimes they mean one, sometimes they mean the other. I think it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, I'll be the first one to say I don't know if we've really kind of landed on a specific delineation. Like I said, some people you talk to will include kind of previs with VAD, and some places will keep it separate. And I've discussed this with people on both sides, and I hear the arguments on both sides. I feel like everything's moving very fast, and it's all very fluid and flexible. As far as like terminology, jargon, what who's offering what, or what the goals of everything is. But I honestly really do feel like no, previs is not too niche. It's incredibly useful and helpful if you've got questions that you need answered, if you've got a use for it, no matter how and it can be done at any level. Like there is not a specific like previs has to look like this, previs has to be full animated walk cycles. Previs can be as simple, like I said, as simple as static characters that are blocked in front of a camera. And if that's answering your questions, perfect. That's then mission accomplished. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the goal.
Another related question from somebody: what advice would you give to someone trying to transition from the traditional art department to a VAD? And if and when you interact with the traditional art department, what are the issues or problems? I got some stories about that, and solutions.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of translating, I guess for an individual who wants to kind of make a leap from a traditional art department into VAD, I would imagine in some way you kind of already have got a little bit of maybe CAD or Sketchfab, Rhino, any of those, some knowledge in those. Um, Again, kind of the concepts that build out an environment, or that kind of to building out some of these set pieces, can then be translated over into kind of doing the same thing in 3D space. Unreal, I know it's very buzzy. It's free, and you can go in and import, build something that you would normally do in any one of the other software packages, import it into Unreal, apply some material to it, start building out an environment. I mean, that is, it's a good way to get knowledge in the software, because coming from traditional art department, you've probably already got all of those concepts down. All of the concepts that make you a great art department asset are the same in VAD. It's the tool set that is being used and the finished product what defines the difference between them, right? In VAD, you are looking for an asset that is able to run in real time, and a digital asset that is able to run in real time. And depending on the project that it's being used for, there might be other specifications that it needs to hit. But again, ultimately, what makes a good environment, what building out structures, and designing these things, the concepts are all the same, right? It's just the same like in cinematography. Just because your camera is a virtual one does not mean that the rules of how to frame an actor change. They don't. It's the same rules. So if you know how to frame a human being with a real camera, then you know how to frame a CG character with a CG camera. It's the same rules, so they still apply. So I would say get into some real-time software. Start kind of learning about things like optimization, and bring in one of your assets into again Unreal. It's free to download. There's plenty of online resources, whether they're from Epic themselves or from users, or kind of anywhere out there. There's so many of them, and there are fantastic ones out there. And play. Really, it's because it's the concepts that make you a great artist. So if you can just pick up the software for long enough to feel comfortable with it, I think you'll be just fine in the virtual art department.
I just realized we have a ton of questions here. My goodness.
Oh my.
So I'm gonna rattle through some more.
Sure.
How far do you take the previs as far as details? Do you get it to it's just good enough to see the scene, or do you like really go in there and polish it?
Sure. I'll try to keep these brief so we can get through as many as possible.
That's a lot of them. It's unusual.
Yeah,
It's
it
funny.
really level of detail in Previz really depends on the client. I have done projects where they want, full textures, and they want, kind of foliage going in the wind and all of those things in Previz. And I have had clients that they're like, no, give me grayscale and put a texture on that character so we can point them out. Like it really does depend on what are they looking for, right? Are they trying to communicate a concept? Sometimes those require a little bit more fine tuning, whether that's texture work. For Ferrari, we had a really cool like toon shader texture because we knew that it was going to edit with storyboards, and he really wanted to communicate the feeling of the camera. It was less about how the uniforms looked and the cars looked, because that was going to be taken care of later. The point of that previs was to communicate the feeling of the camera and how the car felt to the drivers in this very closed, confined space. The point of Ad Astra was to, there was a lot of exploratory stuff with the director, but then also like the VFX supervisor would come in and just like, they want technical information. They want to be able to know how much blue screen do we need to put behind the actor. We've got 30 feet of this giant antenna that we're going to be building. So where do we put him for the cameras that we've created, and how much blue do we need behind it? So it really depends on what the client's looking for. And sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less.
Right. Yeah. Good answer. Somebody is saying, what kind of stuff does one need to show to be in consideration for a team that you're talking about? I guess they're talking about how do you like show reel, what kinds of things do you show to apply for roles in Previz or VAD?
Yeah, if you're looking for something in Previz, showing a range of skills is great. Showing work in a range of skills. Also, most importantly, showing like a willingness. And I know it's hard, you can't put that in a reel, but like showing a willingness to try new things, right? Like, I love getting people. Again, like I said earlier, you want to try new things? Fantastic, great. I will throw some tasks your way. And pull people like that onto a team, because then I know that they're flexible and can just like pivot to the next thing right away. Showing on a show reel, it's really what I want to see is just the diversity of experience, if you've got it, a range of skills. And then I do really want to know, like, all right, you've got a little bit of animation skill. How much? Like, if you had to rank yourself, where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses? I don't want to call them weaknesses. I guess where are your strengths and where are your slightly less strengths? Because even knowing those, I can still use them if I know that you've got that experience. That's really what I'd like to see. Kind of the same thing in VAD. It's a little bit more focused on, kind of the materials, textures, environment building, lighting. All those kind of more related things. So less so with animation and such. But same idea applies. And then the idea of world building and making, I've made an environment and these pieces feel cohesive, right? The sky feels like it sits inside this world, and so do these buildings. That's also really, really important, being able to show that, just kind of translating an idea into something that can be, that feels like a cohesive world.
Here's another interesting question. I don't know if I'm going to have time to ask all these, but this is a good one. What is the magic that makes Lux Lux? What's the secret sauce?
What makes Lux Lux? I honestly, this is going to sound so cheesy, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I really feel like it is the people. about a year ago, I made the transition from Halon over to Lux Machina. And I've been so happy with it, and getting to know all of the people at Lux, and just, I mean, all of the people at Halon are also brilliant and fantastic. There is again, kind of this diversity of backgrounds and experiences that really kind of come together in this like brain soup there, where just like you've got everybody's able to just talk and communicate and see an issue or see an idea from different angles and then put those together. It really just feels so collaborative and so cool that like when new technologies come up, there like people are just like on it, and there's these like Slack threads with like, yeah, we can do this, or we can use it like that, or what if we did this, and like what if we did that, and everyone's kind of coming at it from different ways, and then what's produced from that is these technologies and workflows and ideas that then we can all arm ourselves with to like take out to clients and say, like, we see you're making a project. Here's what we think might be able to help. Or when clients come to us and they say, we're doing a project, this is our goal, help us get there. We're like, yes, we've got a ton of ideas. Or I've had this idea, I've been waiting for the right project to be able to use it on. It's just so cool, and it just feels like sparks are always like firing off there. And I honestly feel like that is what makes Lux Lux. And I know it's cheesy, but it really is the truth. It's just all these like brilliant minds attacking something from all different angles, and and then magic happens.
That's great. Oh, well, you're probably going to get a flood of applications now. Yeah,
Great, send them in.
I always love visiting, so I can imagine working there must be awesome.
It's so cool. Like it just feels like way cooler than I am when every time I walk in there, and I'm just like, I get to do this.
That's amazing. It makes life worth living.
It does.
So tell us a bit about what you do. Lux, you're a virtual production supervisor. Maybe some people don't know what that is even.
Yeah. Well, it's it's kind of a diverse title. No, what's really nice about it is that at the beginning of a project, you you talk with the client. At this point, they've already come in. They say, we're making this project. We want to solve these things, right? This is how we're going to shoot. We've got these ideas we're going to do. This is the kind of setup. This is kind of what we're thinking. Or we're kind of thinking maybe a couple of these ideas. Does this work? It might be anything from an LED solution. It might be a live compositing. It might be simulcam solution, AR, XR. Maybe it's an event and they want really cool visuals and graphics, combined with any one of these other things. But from the outset, it's putting that plan together, like listening to the client, hearing what they're wanting, hearing what they're saying, and then understanding what it is they're needing. Kind of talking back and forth with them at a place that everybody's comfortable, and then going forward, kind of helping to usher the team that's going to help execute this, right? Because it's not just myself in these conversations, it's a whole brain trust. And so then when it gets time to actually like, we're going to go do the shoot, it's, taking care of my team, because it's not me coming up with all the great ideas. It really is, I've got engine operators that are, pulling off some amazing work all the time. And we've got camera tracking is coming in and doing their thing. We've got systems people that are like maintaining these like huge racks of technology and making sure that every piece of it is all able to communicate. And I kind of sit there, and sometimes it feels like wrangling cats, because everybody's, got their tasks that they need to go do. And then, kind of being able to turn around to the client and talk with them and just communicate. They say, I need X, and I'm able to go back to my team and say, all right, you're the one who's takes care of X. So, let's take care of X. Let's do this, and kind of help, be the conduit between what the client needs and executing that plan. through the team. So I'm not the one actually executing the plan. The team's the one doing all the hard work. I just kind of get to be that conduit between everybody, and it's fun. It's cool because I kind of see the whole thing from a higher level, and help kind of manage the moving pieces underneath. While at the same time, giving the client a face that they can come to and say, all right, you are the person I ask about these things. Or you're the person I talk to about these things. That way the team can do what they need to do. And I can field a lot of that for the team. And then afterwards, it's kind of just bringing everyone back together. It's cool. There's so much more that I'm like leaving out from what a virtual production supervisor does. And it really does change from project to project, kind of the needs of this role. But it really is on the surface, and to boil it down to one thing, is it's kind of acting as that conduit between, between the client and, executing their request, executing what it is they need.
I have so many more things that I want to ask you, and the public too. I just want to quickly ask you about: are you able to talk about Pinocchio at all? Is that
yeah?
Okay.
Yes.
Talk about Pinocchio.
So yeah, I'll just go right ahead. First of all, to clarify, it is the Zemeckis Pinocchio, not the Del Toro one. Both of them are beautiful. No, I did. When I was with Halon, it was actually my last project with Halon. Before moving over to Lux, I spent 14 months working on Pinocchio. It was fully remote. So from my living room, what we did was we built a fully remote but bespoke virtual camera system for Robert Zemeckis to use for Previz. He used it during layouts, and then we took that system and then made it into like a virtual wheels system, so the A camera operator, Pete Wilkie, was able to then operate digital wheels to capture the final cameras that were in the movie. That's kind of it in a nutshell, but it was really much cooler than that. I mean,
this is within Unreal Engine?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is all inside Unreal Engine. So with Halon, we had a Previz team that was doing, they did amazing Previz. We had animation, we had a VAD. But myself and my team, what we did was Robert Zemeckis is no stranger to visual effects, right? And not a stranger to virtual camera, but wanted a system. First of all, this is like handful of months into the beginning of the pandemic. A handful of months into the start of the pandemic, already we're getting underway on this movie, but we need a virtual camera that can be operated remote. And he had some very specific ideas for what he wanted, right? A virtual camera setup, if anyone out there has picked one up, oftentimes you'll have buttons, you'll have a viewport, you'll have some level of control. And he didn't want that, which is his workflow. Like, who am I to tell Robert Zemeckis that he's got to have buttons and a viewport? I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, yes, sir. I'm going to give you the VCam that you want. And so that's what we did. We went out and we stripped out all the buttons. We designed an entire user interface for myself to use that had all of those buttons, lens switching and scale and movement. And we gave him a VCam that was tracking, so he was able to point and click and use the camera language that he's familiar with, use a workflow that he's familiar with, without the technology interfering with that. And then I operated, and once we started shooting, we had a couple shoot days. There were like 200 cameras in a day. These were multi-user sessions. So we were also doing like environment reviews. So at any point in a camera session, we might have to like move trees or move a house, or let's take this entire cast of characters and shift them over a little bit. Now continue shooting. So we did have some multi-users in to kind of help with some of this background stuff. It was all done, like I said, fully remote in Unreal. So, you know, Robert Zemeckis was at his office and I was at my home. And we were able to kind of operate this. We did this all through Previz. During 3 months of filming in the UK, I went out there. This was the only time I ever came in contact with any of the production people, was 3 months in the UK on set, where we did some tech viz. So they brought in a techno dolly and they had already prevised a lot of the Pleasure Island, like canal shots. But what they wanted to do was validate that, you know, now that we've got the techno dolly in, can this techno dolly do that shot, or is this virtual camera, this camera that we've made, go outside of the range of this? So we built a tool on site that was able to validate it. We put in, you know, the range of motion of the techno dolly and attached that tool to the virtual cameras, and it basically just told us when, like, okay, no, your physical world techno dolly cannot get the shot because it goes outside of the range of motion. And with that, we were able to go back to the production team and tell them, this camera, the shot that you're looking at, is, you know, it triggers it breaks one of the rules of the techno dolly. And what that did was it allowed them to make a decision. All right, well, how much does it break it? Are we okay with changing the shot a little bit? Do we want to redesign the shot? We're not making that decision for them. We're really just giving them the information to take a decision. But because we're able to tell them, these are your cameras that are going to break in the sequence that you can't really capture with your onset tools, they were then able to make an informed decision of, yeah, we're okay with it for that shot because it's really only a very minor change. Or, you know what, that really does change the shot. Maybe we want to redesign this camera, and giving them that information. So yeah, we did 3 months in the UK to do like some previs or some tech viz. And then on the other side of that, we continued to do CG cameras with Robert Zemeckis, but we also, like I said, set up Pete Wilkie with a Noto Wheels device that he was able to use at his home in Vancouver. And what was really great about this is that Pete he's not a video gamer. He's not a CG guy. He is an on-set camera operator. You know, he does use the wheels on set, but he was so seamlessly able to translate his skills and what he does as a camera operator into the virtual space. He did this. I helped him a lot with it. So, you know, all the same things that I was doing for Bob, lensing and all of these other things, you know, I was able to do for Pete as well. But he and I developed like a kind of a jargon between the two of us. And I helped teach him a little bit of like, all right, when you say this, I'm thinking you mean this, but really you actually mean this other thing. And he would say the same things to me. And eventually we got to this workflow that worked really well for both of us, to be able to communicate better and teach each other a little bit about our crafts. But it allowed him to bring his amazing camera skills into the virtual space, which is a really great thing to see, because when you're watching the movie, anything that's all live action people, that's been shot by him. That was shot by him on set. It would be a shame for the other half of the movie to have to be shot by somebody else when he can bring his skills in. And now you have this very cohesive camera language, not only like throughout your CG and your live action shots, because you've got the same operator designing those shots, regardless of whether they were live action or CG, regardless of what his training was. He brought his skills to the camera, no matter where it was. And I thought that was really, really cool. Like that was extra magical, just to be able to facilitate that. It was a lot of hours. It was a very long run. It was very stressful at times, but it was so rewarding by the end of it. I had an amazing team. We had some amazing vendors that we worked with as well. And I mean, gosh, the experience of working one-on-one with Robert Zemeckis, like it's like just sitting there on a master class. There were some shots he'd be setting up and he's, you know, telling me like, I want to attach to this character. And when it hits, when this character goes by, I want to stand here, and then when this character goes by, I want to attach to them, and then he would face in an opposite direction. And I'm sitting there like, what is this camera going to look like? And then I hit record and I'm watching it unfold, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a great shot. And it's just this really cool, like up close and personal masterclass in filmmaking that was a once in a lifetime, such a unique experience.
That's so cool, and an
Yeah,
education that you couldn't buy even if you
you
wanted to.
can't.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was really cool. Yeah, I mean, I could. There's just so much to that project. Just even in building the virtual camera, in building some of the tools, not only that we put in the hands of the filmmakers on that one, but just even behind the scenes, some of our tools that we built for our team, some of our automation, some of our workflows that we had built. It was definitely a labor of love for a little while, but it was, it helped advance a lot of processes and technologies for us. It helped advance our understanding of some of these things. Of some of these processes, and it was just such a cool thing. And knowing that like a project like that is also built on the back of other projects. Like every time you do a project, you learn something new, and you take that into the next one, and then you take that into the next one. And it was the culmination of kind of a series of projects that had been kind of training grounds and proof of concept kind of projects. So to see that come to fruition, but then also to see, the ideas that are coming out of that, and some projects that are kind of in talks and in works, and knowing that like some of those ideas are, were generated from things that were done on Pinocchio, which was generated on things that were done before that, and kind of seeing those building blocks come together. It's really, really cool.
You've seen those same people go through some of these formative virtual production movies. I watched a lot of people come off Avatar and join Jungle Book, and then
Yep.
The Lion King, and then they fed in through Ready Player One and various movies up to this date, or even in TV as well. Some of that goes in through people, and some of it was the technology at the time was kind of born and died with the movie, but now with Unreal Engine, it has kind
Not
of like a
anymore. Yeah.
permanent home that even like the individual gets to use, and people out there can now make their own movies.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, people, if you've got an iPhone and, you just download an app, and suddenly you've got a VCam, right? It's all, that's really kind of the cool thing, is that because the technology doesn't just, live and die with one project, it's able to propagate. It's then also in some ways the super new, super big stuff is also a little bit able to democratize a little bit, right? After, like, I mean, again, kind of tracing the lines of everything. VCam as it is today is a direct descendant of stuff that was done a decade ago, 2 decades ago, right? Like you can see that everyone can draw a line for in VCam straight to the first Avatar, and then even before that there was all of these like
Lord of the
smaller
Rings,
things,
and yeah,
Lord of the Rings,
yeah,
exactly. And so but obviously at the time that those films came out, that kind of technology was not widely available to all, even to all A-list filmmakers, much less students who want to learn, or indie filmmakers, or kids that just want to play with technology. Like these things weren't available then, but because we've gotten into this role of, technology does not, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every film. We can add new spokes to the wheel, or we can add a new layer of tread to the wheel and start, kind of rolling down the hill that way. It's because we're in this phase, it allows kind of it allows the technology to really trickle down to everybody else in many different forms, right? There's not just one VCam. You've got so many different ways to build a VCam, so many different ways to do camera tracking, so many different ways to do body and motion tracking. a lot of different software options, a lot of different education options, and all of this is possible because we're not throwing it all away after every film and then spending the money to rebuild it. It amortizes, and it's, you know, it's now available widely to everybody, that like you can pick it up in one form or another. Much of it you can pick it up in one form or another for free, and at least start tinkering with it to understand it, which is so, just so cool to see. And it's really neat time in VFX that we're in right now. And I know probably everybody can say that about their own unique times, but
I
it's
think you're
cool,
right, though. It is a particularly special time. I think
right?
I've only been in it for 15 years, but through that time, this is definitely the where I've seen them in the last 5 years, seen the most innovation and new and excitement
Yeah.
in the whole time I've been doing it,
I
for
mean,
sure.
I've only been doing this for 9 years, and even just in my 9 years, it's gone lightning quick. Like it's insane and incredible and mind-boggling at the same time, that it's just like, whew, it's
Hard to keep
going
up.
so fast. It sometimes is, but it's really cool to watch it.
Well, as a closing question, what are you excited about the most in what you're seeing at the moment? What does the future hold?
Ooh,
A big question,
yeah,
but
that is a big question.
anything like I know people talking about like, machine learning and how that's affecting the
Yeah,
industry. Like,
yeah. So there is a lot of really cool stuff happening with machine learning. Um, uh, actually, and this is half a joke, half also serious. This meme the other day about having, can we finally get AI to do this? And it was UV mapping. So I would be very happy
yeah,
if
right.
we can just like get an AI UV mapping and just get that out of the way. Um,
I've only met one person in my
sorry to
career
the
who enjoys it, but
exactly. I was gonna say
that's
sorry to the 1% of the entire planet's population that enjoys UV mapping. I'm sure you love it, and that's valid. And I'm sorry if I've offended you, but I don't like it. UV mapping's terrible. No, I am really excited for AI. I'm excited for machine learning. I'm also just really excited for uh, kind of this like live VFX. I know it's already kind of here, but like seeing kind of where that's going. Um, AR and XR is, kind of being more widely used, which for me is kind of a new space, right? Like at Halon and kind of in film and scripted, a little bit less use of AR and XR. So like over in the world of Lux Machina, there's more projects. So me personally, kind of exposed to those more and more. Um, Another thing I'm really actually quite excited about is to start seeing a diversification of uses for these technologies outside of film, scripted and like entertainment uses, right? There's a lot of really great uses of um, technologies being used for educational purposes, for uh, you know, um, theater uses as well. Just kind of these like non-traditional ideas of like where this kind of technology is being implemented and how it is being used. Because again, we're kind of reaching this level of democratization where, when you kind of trickle down to like the indie filmmakers and the student filmmakers and even the pre-student filmmakers that are, kind of the kids making films, you've got this technology meeting them. The next step is to like, then also branch out and away from film, right? How can theater implement these kinds of things? How can schools use these kinds of things? How can we use these technologies to maybe bring different experiences or different shared experiences across, kind of the disabled community. I'm so sorry if I'm labeling that wrong, but like, you know, my mom is an interpreter, interpreter for the deaf, and one of the things I've always wanted to do with her is to like get her motion, you know, kind of uh yeah, like I've always wanted to just give her a way that she can do her sign language in a CG space, because she herself, you know, has multiple sclerosis, kind of finds it a little difficult to, you know, to kind of get up and move in some days. But if she can, you know, maybe put on a set of motion tracking gloves and then host, you know, classes where she's teaching sign language, or meet in a VR space or something where she's still able to communicate there, like in sign language, I find that to be incredibly special and very hopeful. And I know in a lot of ways that this is being done, but to see this be brought up to a place where, you know, different communities, whether, you know, no matter who you are, no matter what your abilities are, no matter, you know, kind of where you sit in life, that everybody can participate, and like this kind of technology is helping to facilitate that. It's really, really very cool. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was very long-winded.
No, that was fantastic, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's a wonderful place to land. I think talking about how kind of disconnected people felt during going through the some aspects of technology and the pandemic, etc. Now talking about how it has the potential to really bring us together and help, like give people a voice who maybe haven't had it as much, or just it has a huge potential. I absolutely agree, and I think it's a very optimistic and hopeful view of technology. Whilst there's so much talk of the kind of the fear side of technology, there is it is meant to help us and help us solve problems and bring us together and enable us to do things. I think it's often portrayed in the media as being this kind of evil thing that's going to kill us all.
It's either that, or it's like these multi-billion-dollar blockbuster films. Like those are the headlines that get, and those blockbuster films are great. They help spread the word about the technology, which helps, you know, the more multi-billion-dollar films use it, the more it's going to trickle down. That's just the you know, that's just the reality of it. But there's more nuanced stories to it, and those are the fun ones that are always amazing to hear.
There's a lot, there's a lot of heart in that. I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
Is there anywhere people can see things that you've done, like connect with you, thing you want to share with the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my LinkedIn, Kristin Turnipseed. The last name is really quite cool. You won't forget it. Yeah, my LinkedIn is there. You can always also check out on either Halon's website or Lux Machina's website. I know someone was talking earlier about applications. There is jobs at NEP.com, I believe. You have to look up that link one more time. But if you're looking, you know, both companies are part of the NEP group, NEP Virtual Studios. And so go ahead and just like look up NEP Virtual Studios. You'll be able to look at job postings at both places, also including our other sister companies as well. So like kind of one spot for a whole bunch of stuff, which is a really great resource. Yeah, like I'm out there on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out at any point. Like I'm always around, and I'm always trying to answer. If I don't, it's probably because I'm on site somewhere. Exactly. But I will get back to you. I try very hard to, so I will get back to you. Yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions and talk to whoever I can. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, there was a bunch of questions, unfortunately, I couldn't get to, both personally and from the group. But Kristin, thanks so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. It's been delightful talking with you, and I've enjoyed where it's gone. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody for all your questions, and thanks for coming to listen to me. This feels really cool for me to just be able to talk with the community. So I'm really happy to have done it, and you know anytime feel free to reach out. This has been great, and thank you, Ed, for having me, for inviting me on. It's really special.
Oh, cool. Well, a pleasure, absolute pleasure. And we've got enough questions for probably another 2-3 episodes. So hopefully we can have you back one day.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you also to our listeners. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for asking great questions. Look forward to another episode in a couple of weeks where we'll be back with Corey Strasburger, Blue from Xanadu, the YouTube channel. Really looking forward to that one too. Yeah, thanks. If you enjoyed this evening and you're interested in what we do as a school, you can check us out at becomecgpro.com or in our Facebook group. But yeah, thank you all again. Thanks again, Kristin. See
Thank
you
you.
all soon.